Kihon Ippon Kumite. Right? Hey! Jordan! Ah! Ah! Jordan! Hiya! Hey! Jordan! Ah! Ah! Jordan! Hiya! Hey! My getting? Ah! Ah! My getting? Hiya! Hey! Yeme, Matsunechi. So some of the forbidden techniques that we should be avoiding, of course, for judgment, etc., are things like, and as an example, blocking Jodan Tsuki this way, and then maybe attacking joints. This is prohibited technique. No attacking any joints, including something like this, blocking and attacking against the elbow. So no joint attack. So also attacking vulnerable targets. As an example, for instance, Haiwan Tsuki this way and Nukute. This one, no. Also Nukute to the throat. Attacks, Kingiri, maybe to the groin. These are prohibited. So again, for normal practice, including competition, of course, contact is always an important issue. And again, if I consider, for instance, blocking Dole and Haiwanuchi this way, and the sort of contact we expect would be Sundome or just touch, people should be able to demonstrate the ability to attack and be right on target. This way, maybe empty, same, just here. This is important to get this element of contact. So, smacking like this is not acceptable, of course. Or being this far away. This is also no good. So if we consider, for instance, here, then Yoraken, so just that consideration, and Gakuzuki, these are correct. However, here, here, and here is incorrect. So again, we've got to think about Mai on all aspects, and that includes the contact. This kind of technique to the stomach, again, useless. It's not a technique, it's not Tatezuki. There's no hip involved, there's no extension, the whole body is wrong. So these are prohibited techniques. Another issue is preempting an attack. This means now that, of course, Zanshin is missing, and anticipation is a bad issue for the karateka. So if our opponent steps back into Zenko Static Rambai, for instance, states an attack, and they wait. The object of the attacker is to look for a weak moment. In other words, if I blink, swallow, look away, lose my concentration. But more so, if I start to preempt like this, start anticipating the movement. That way, my opponent can take advantage and make the attack. which means I'm now totally vulnerable. Okay, so this is preempting an attack. The other one is, for the attacker to anticipate where my opponent is going to go. And what I mean by that is, if I say Judan attack this way, and I know they're going to be stepping, I anticipate that movement and do this way. So the timing is wrong. This is punching, landing in order to beat your opponent. These sort of techniques are totally invalid. So no, it should never happen. What we should consider always is the timing. I say Chudan, my opponent is waiting, I wait until that moment of attack, then I attack. I'm not anticipating their movement. It's also forbidden to use ashibarai or takedowns, nagi technique, in Kihon Ippon Kumite for competition. And I stress that everything we've done today in this short presentation is about competition rules. When it comes to learning in the dojo, of course, ashibarai is very acceptable, as is indeed nagi technique, if it's appropriate. So, for instance, can you step back, Zenko Sadachi ground right, please? Jodan Zuki. For instance, something of this nature here, then this kind of thing is prohibited. Okay, so takedowns like that are not acceptable. Also, again, Jodan Zuki, please. Maybe here, and this kind of ashibara, not acceptable either. One more, maybe the classic ashibarai of Jodan Zuki, here, and take down on the instant of attack. So those are prohibited techniques. So with regard to the judgment of the competition, referees should be looking for the basic principles of karate movement. For instance, if I step back in Zenko Tsurachi Giranbrai and I'm not using hips, for instance, I'm simply placing the foot, everything would be incorrect. So at basic level, maybe the 9th kyu to 7th kyu grade, where you block and make Gakatsuki. If I step back Gadambarai and turn like this, my foot is wrong here, which means, of course, that from this position, it's impossible to do Gakatsuki. So if a competitor does something like this, for instance, this is a non-technique, so it can't score. Irrelevant whether it's on target or not. This is still not Gakatsuki. It's just an arm movement. It's impossible to use the hips. The competitor who understands this movement more deserves to win. In other words, when they step, that feeling of using the hip, the foot, kikite, then Gakatsuki absolutely correctly, on target, and with using the whole body. So the judgment there is very simple. The person who does it correctly wins. There are other issues, of course. So just step back to Zenko Tsunachi Gambai, please. Say Jodan.
Jodan!
So someone attacking Jodan and leaning to make the attack. So for instance, they step, Jodan, and there's me going backwards, my opponent trying to reach. This is incorrect. If I'm leaning backwards, my opponent should still be correct. That means they win. Although, if we look at this distance, now this is a really bad movement. I am avoiding the contact by leaning back. What my opponent does not do is to lean forward in order to reach because I'm stepping backwards or leaning back. So this is incorrect. So again, easy judgment. When one person is correct, the other one is incorrect. To avoid this attack, then it's easy. This person wins, this one loses. That's it. It's very, very simple stuff. Also, look at the wrist. If the wrist is pointing up or down on the attack, like this is also a minus point. So these are easy to see, as opposed to someone who has a correct fist. Here, absolutely correct. And target, of course. Another one is look at the thumb. The thumb here sticking down, out of the way. This is a bad fist, of course. So again, minus point. This is how it should be. This is how it shouldn't be. But you see a lot of lower grades punching like this. So weak wrist or loose fist, no good. So these are aids to the referee making a decision. The other one is hikite. So for instance, gyakutsuki here and a weak hikite here means usually that the hip is not being employed to make the most of the technique. And the other one is target. So here on the sternum, not a good target, either chudan or jodan. So these sorts of techniques are neither here nor there. It's neither jodan or chudan. Hikite, target, hip, and also the knee. Think of someone with the knee going outwards or inwards, rotating the hip, over rotation of the hip, and also, of course, too far forward, like this, means now, of course, balance is broken. Too far back means power is not going into the target. So all of these issues are easy to see, and indeed are exactly the same for a grading examiner when a student is undergoing their grading test. So it's really very, very little difference. When it comes to kicking, keri technique, try to watch for someone attacking. I'll just hold the foot like this, kingeri, or the foot loose like this. This is a weakness. Instead of pulling back, koshi, the ball of the foot. And also, of course, look at the target, somewhere here. Landing. Landing after the kick by just dropping. No hikiashi. Okay, so hikiashi is good. Hikiashi is good and controlling the descent, as opposed to just driving and falling. This is a bad technique. So someone who's kicking correctly, someone who's kicking incorrectly, doesn't matter if it's on target even, it is a bad technique and therefore doesn't warrant. All we have to think about always is the criteria that we use in Kumite. Would you give a wazari, for instance, for someone kicking like this? And the answer is no. However, that kind of thing would be maybe a wazari. The other one that we have to look for is, your hands behind your back a moment, is kicking maegiri like this. Failure to change the linear or the circular direction of a kick into a linear attack, rather kicking up. This is not maegiri. At some stage, you have to turn a circular motion into a linear motion, kicking straight forward. So this person should win as opposed to someone lifting and dropping. This was a good guide, I think, for people wanting to understand what's expected of any competitor in Kihon Ippon Kumite. It's by no means exhaustive, and it's by no means in depth. There's an awful lot more to it. So you can see the complexity of what's considered to be easy levels of Kumite, and they're not. These are the base levels of Kumite that enable you to understand a lot of the issues that you as a karateka require, and to do Kumite, fighting, saving your life, whatever you might call it. It's also worth mentioning that we will consider the inclusion of Yokogeri Kikomi and Marshigeri for the higher level of Kihon Ippon Kumite later. But for the moment, we're just sticking with the Jodan, Chudan, Maigeri. Complexity of technique is okay, but remember, it has to be executed correctly, showing all the attributes of the technique. And that means the use of hips, ankles, and the rest of the body, breathing, and kiai. I talked earlier on about kiai. It's incorrect. And you also see a lot of karateka punching or kicking, it doesn't matter. And the kiai is accompanied by a lean, like this. This is also no good. The kiai itself is very short, very sharp. It's this speed, nothing more. It's the finish of breathing at the end of the technique with kime. Kime and shime. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this short explanation of Kihon Ippon Kumite. I'd like to thank my students, Robert Breakup and Phil Cook, and Georgina, of course. Thank you very much indeed.